First impressions count for a lot, and that's as true in video games as it is for anything else in the world. Those opening moments will help a player crystallize what they can expect going forward, and if indeed they want to move forward. And while we're all familiar with gaming's many great opening cinematics and FMV sequences, what about those intros that just felt so aggressively divorced from the rest of the game itself? Perhaps these intros were inconsistent with the style, tone, and aesthetic of the main game, suggested it would be something it wasn't, or otherwise bamboozled players with its off-the-wall content. Whatever the reason, these 10 video game intros felt completely out of place, for better or worse. Some immediately lowering the player's expectations, while others taught them to expect the unexpected for the rest of the experience. I'm Jess from WhatCulture, and here are 10 totally out of place video game intros. Number 10. Mortal Kombat Special Forces. Don't feel bad if you haven't even heard of Mortal Kombat Special Forces. It's admittedly a deeply terrible Mortal Kombat spin-off released in 2000. A third-person brawler shooter in which players take control of Jax as he pursues Kano. Now, the bulk of the game itself is a fairly gritty and serious action title, but you wouldn't know it from the gut-bustingly funny intro. The shamelessly campy opening, which showcases the game's various characters against colorful backdrops while set to peppy music that'd feel more at home in Austin Powers, couldn't feel less accurate a representation of what Mortal Kombat Special Forces actually is. Given that many prominent members of Midway, such as Mortal Kombat co-creator John Tobias, left the company before development was complete, it's perhaps little surprise that the game's identity feels so schizophrenic right from the jump. Ultimately, Special Forces sold so horribly that it contributed to the mainline series being put on ice for a few years, and that intro probably didn't help. Number 9. Brutal Legend. Double Fine's cult fave action RTS game Brutal Legend stars Jack Black as Eddie Riggs, a roadie who's transported to a heavy metal fantasy world. Yet its intro presents a wraparound frame narrative that's ultimately never returned to. The game kicks off with a live-action FMV sequence where Jack Black takes the player into a record store to show them a heavy metal record that even the staff don't know about. After some searching, Black finds the record and presents it to the player, at which point, the perspective shifts to a table with the Brutal Legend album on it, which also doubles for the game's menu. Though this opening might prime you to expect Jack Black to return in live-action form throughout the game, and especially at the end, it never happens. As it turns out, this is nothing more than a cute opening and has no bearing on what the game actually is, apart from Jack Black being in it. Number 8. Mario Party 4. Mario Party 4 isn't one of the better entries in the series, but it's still a solidly crafted party game with a high degree of visual polish throughout. As such, the game's nightmare-inducing intro feels super out of place. The opening video, in which Mario and his various friends and foes are invited by Toad to join him on his party cube, looks like something a Mario fan threw together in 3D Studio Max over a weekend, rather than an officially licensed FMV included in a major Nintendo release. The character animations are horrible, to be kind, and compared to the slick, detail-animated intros from the other Nintendo games of the era, it can't help but come off as completely embarrassing. That Nintendo signed off on these lo-fi character models awkwardly shuffling around such a bland, basic environment is absolutely shocking. It also feels totally amiss in a game that was otherwise lauded as a visual upgrade from the third Mario Party. Number 7. Skate. Though the Tony Hawk Pro Skater games typically kicked off with live-action skating montages set to popular rock music from the period, the very first Skate game established an altogether loonier tradition for its own series. The intro sees the player character hit by a bus, after which they're scooped up by an ambulance, chaotically driven to hospital, and then undergo surgery, as scored by heavy metal music. After waking up, you're finally spat out into the game world itself. Skate's intro is certainly a lot of fun, jam-packed with cameos from real-life skaters featured in the game no less. But beyond demonstrating that it isn't taking itself remotely seriously, it was pretty much just an excuse to goof off without having any substantial bearing on the core game. Nobody's complaining mind, and Skate 2 took this to arguably even more ridiculous lengths by opening with a live-action short film. In this case, the player character was released from prison while featuring no actual skating at all. Incredible. Number 6. Danganronpa 2 – Goodbye Despair. Danganronpa 2 Goodbye Despair begins with an almost 2-hour prologue as our focal group of high school students awaken on a tropical island. The student's teacher, the rabbit-like Usami, initially claims the excursion is a field trip and plainly balks at the mere utterance of the word kill. while insisting the goal of the game is to simply relax, bond with your fellow classmates, and have fun. As Usami announces the beginning of the school trip, a nauseatingly peppy, colorful intro video plays out, which basically feels the polar opposite of the expected tone and vibe of a Danganronpa game. The central characters are introduced with the enthusiasm of a teen comedy series, and the end title refers to itself as Dangan Island. But more than an hour later, the game really begins when Headmaster Monokuma shows up and instigates the killing game, but for a considerably darker rendition of the actual opening credits for Danganronpa 2 play out. It's all tonally intentionally messing with the player, of course, but that candy-colored bubblegum-flavored fake-out opening truly sticks out like the sorest of thumbs. Number 5. Grand Theft Auto 2. Grand Theft Auto 2 provides proof perfect that an intro can be totally out of place and also entirely entertaining. Though the original GTA didn't have much of an intro to speak of, its success nevertheless allowed Rockstar, then DMA Design, to splash a little extra dough on commissioning a gritty live-action opening video for the sequel. And so GTA 2 opens with a 2-minute montage of cops and robbers going to war in what is very clearly New York City. Though incredibly well made in accurately capturing the gritty vibe of 1970s crime cinema, does it have anything at all to do with GTA 2? Not really. In fact, the intro was edited down from an 8-minute short film created to promote the game, which, as exciting as it is, features few characters who actually appear in the game. Furthermore, GTA 2's central setting of Anywhere City isn't at all like New York City. All the same, it sure got players pumped to start the game, so the video basically did its job. Number 4. Far Cry 3. Far Cry 3's opening montage is basically the least Far Cry thing imaginable. It's just a bunch of people having fun and living their best lives. The game kicks off by fleetingly introducing the player to protagonist Jason Brody and his vapid friends as they vacation in Bangkok, showing them drinking, partying at clubs, riding jet skis, paragliding, interacting with the local wildlife, and going skydiving. It's all set to the MIA song Paper Planes, as if to date it even more. Yet this intro comes grinding to a halt when the camera pulls out to reveal that these scenes are actually video clips being watched by the game's iconic pirate lord villain Vas Montenegro, who's imprisoned Jason and his pals. In this case, the disconnect is absolutely intentional, bewildering the player with a bunch of fun vibes and then hitting them with the reality of their gritty situation. But if that opening minute made you think Ubisoft would ease you in gently, nobody could blame you. Number 3. Metal Gear Solid 4 Guns of the Patriots. Hideo Kojima and Out of Place really do go together like PB&J, but the beginning of Metal Gear Solid 4 Guns of the Patriots tested even his most loyal fanbase's tolerance for weirdness. The game begins with one of several randomly selected live-action videos, ranging from commercials for private military companies to cooking shows, nanomachine workout infomercials, and so on. But by far the most widely remembered of them all, a talk show called Celebrity Moralist, where Solid Snake voice actor David Hayter appears as a fictionalized eye patch-clad version of himself, while the host is played by Lee Merriweather, who portrays Big Mama/Eva in the game. These clips continue to baffle fans to this very day, and while they're evidently intended to flesh out the world of the Metal Gear universe by showing how PMCs, nanotech, and war have become a part of everyday life, they come as a huge shock to players first expecting to see Solid Snake running around. Number 2. BOBBLE, also featuring Rainbow Islands. There simply aren't enough drugs in the world to explain what the developers of BOBBLE, also featuring Rainbow Islands, were thinking when they decided to put this borderline experimental 2-minute video at the start of their game. Before players can get on with the expected platforming shenanigans, they're presented with a frankly insane, abjectly nonsensical animated FMV sequence that's packed with poorly detailed characters traipsing through a world so aggressively candy-colored, it's liable to give you a hangover tier migraine. 3D animation was still very much an emerging art form when the home version of the game was released in 1996. But even so, this is the sort of inexplicable nonsense liable to give even the hardiest kids a few weeks worth of trauma nightmares. Number 1. Resident Evil. There's perhaps no live-action video game intro more famous or infamous than that of the original Resident Evil. The mesmerizingly ridiculous opening depicts the STARS team touching down outside the Spencer mansion, when they're soon enough attacked by zombie dogs, forcing the survivors to frantically seek refuge inside said mansion. We then cut to a delightfully funky credits call for the central characters, and it all feels very in the vein of a B-movie before the game's title flashes up. It's shamelessly silly stuff, and while the first Resident Evil is undeniably indebted to B-movie horror, it's fair to say that the main game itself is actually trying to be a genuinely scary survival horror experience. The stiff acting certainly wasn't a purposeful decision, that's for sure. And so there's a fundamental disconnect between the flagrantly self-aware live-action intro and the gameplay's more straight-faced attempt at devising a terrifying atmosphere, no matter how heightened it might be. Again, that intro is absolutely iconic, and it would be sorely missed if it wasn't there. It just doesn't particularly gel with the game that comes after. That's the end of our list, but let me know down in that comment section if you can think of any other totally out of place intros in video games. As always, I've been Jess from WhatCulture. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you like, you can come say hi to me on my Twitter account where I'm @JessMcDonnell, but make sure you stay tuned to us here for plenty more great gaming lists.